Let's join in a moment of prayer. Gracious God, we thank you and we praise you. And we ask that your presence be here among us. We ask that you bless the words of our mouths and the thoughts of our minds. May everything we do and everything we say be holy and acceptable to you, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Through Christ our Lord we pray. Amen. So I went to the UB Dental School the other day to have my teeth cleaned. I know there's some of you that also go to the UB Dental School. And I was sitting there, kind of bored for a little while as my dental student was talking to the faculty person. And so I started eavesdropping on the conversation going on in the chair next to me because, what else was I going to do? And so I was listening to the conversation going on between the faculty dentist person and the patient who was sitting in the chair. And I assumed that they were talking about their plans for Thanksgiving. And the faculty dentist started talking about how she's trying to explain to her mom how she just can't do everything the same way that her mom used to. She just can't do it all. She can't do everything the wonderful, picture-perfect way that her mom had done because she just doesn't have the time. And then the person who was sitting in the chair, the patient, concurred and said, no, I know what you mean. I have a to-do list with 1,000 items on it, and by the time I get to crossing items off that list, I go back and check and realize that I now have 1,500 things to do on my to-do list. We all know what it's like to be busy. Two people who don't have a single thing in common, who might not know each other at all, can have a common interest in talking about how busy they are. Because we are all so busy. And when we're busy, when most of us are probably busy people, when we're busy, what do a lot of us do? We prioritize. It's kind of a thing that a lot of us have to do. We realize, all right, I'm busy, I have a lot to do, so I will prioritize. Is anybody else here a list writer? Yeah, I'm a list writer. It's the only way I stay sane. If I have a lot of things to do, you write your items on your list. You create a priority list. And I've noticed that a lot of people do this. I'm not alone in writing priority lists. I realize that there are many people who do this, and I know that there are many people, who knows, unfortunately it might even be the majority of people today, who write their priority list. And on that list, God is nowhere to be found. And then I know that there's other people who they write their priority list and they put God on the list, but God's like number 53 out of 70, kind of down there pretty far. I'll pray today if I have time, I'll go to church if I have time. It's one of those items that's pretty far down on the to-do list. And then I see many people, and many of you might fit into this category, I see many people who want so badly to put God at the top of their priority list. All of their intentions are to put God right up there as number one in their priority list. But it's just so hard. They really are busy. They really want to come to church every single week, at least once, but they just don't have the time. They want to pray every day, but they're just so busy that they forget. Some of us might fall into that category, that form of people who write lists. But then there's people, and I know that there are many people like this here in this church. There are people who not only have God at the top of their priority list, but there are people, and I know it, I see it here in this church, who not only have God as a top priority in their life, but they include God in every single item on their priority list. Somehow, some way, God becomes a part of every item on their priority list. And so today, what all of us busy people are going to talk about and think about is how can we be like that last group? How can we be like those people who write their list and they've got busy lives, but they find a way to include God in every item on their list? And to do that, we're going to think about the psalm that we just read. We just read the 46th Psalm, and the 46th Psalm is similar actually to the 23rd Psalm. They have they have common similarities, and they're called Psalms of Communal Trust. They would have been sung together. It's one of those psalms that really was not meant to be read, it's meant to be sung, and they were meant to be sung together, and it was a song of communal trust. But what did they do? The king, the whole entire city, they were stressed out. They were feeling the pressure of somebody wanting to take over the territory. And so what did they do? Who did they turn to? God. Now you notice that instead of just, complaining or whining or blaming other people, I realize when things don't go people's way, a lot of humans like to blame other people. It's often one of the easiest things to do. But instead of doing that, instead of, commiserating and just complaining about what was going on, they joined together as a people and they sang a song of communal trust. They reminded themselves that they can trust God. They reminded themselves that God is with them. They reminded themselves that instead of rushing to do what they think might solve their problems, they need to first be still and know that God is God. Now I watch people, stress out about how busy they are. Raise your hand if you've ever stressed out about how busy you are. Anybody? Thank you for your honesty. I see a lot of people stress out. You can see it on their faces a lot of times. I see people stress out about how busy they are. But stress will only add to more stress until we stop and we meditate on one thing. Until we stop and think to be still and know that God is God. Now, some of you might say, Pastor, I want to do that. I want to slow down, but I'm just so busy. I can't figure out how. I don't know how to give God more time. I don't know how to change the way that I prioritize. I don't know what to do. And I hear you. I know that we have many busy people in this church, and believe me, I hear you. I was thinking back to when I was in seminary. So before I got married and everything, when I was in seminary, and I was a full-time seminary student, and I waitressed 20 to 30 hours a week, and I was a youth minister at my church, and I was a deacon at my church, and I ran the worship services at the School of Theology. I did all that, but I wasn't married yet, and you know what? I somehow found time to go to church 3 times a week and to spend time in personal devotion and prayer. And I found out that I actually had more time to do that stuff then than I do now. I had more time to focus on worshiping God then when I was a crazy busy person than I do now. You want to know what the difference is between then and now? I didn't have a husband and 2 kids then.
2 dogs.
Yeah. I didn't have people who depended on me every single day. So when folks from the church tell me, I'm just so busy, especially those with young families, I get it. It's hard to find time for God when you seriously are just so busy. I get it. I see it in myself. I, even as a pastor, don't have as much time to worship and to spend time in prayer and devotion now as I did back when every single hour of my life was planned. So I get it. You don't have to explain it to me, but here's the thing. Even though it's hard to find time for God, even though it's hard to find time to worship and to have centered prayer, it's important. We still need to find time for God. And studies have shown that meditation is actually good for your health. And now this morning with the kids at the children's moment, we actually practiced 30 seconds of centered prayer. Now that's, it's a form of meditation. It's when you have 30 seconds when you're maybe praying over one verse and you're just being silent. Now our kids did a great job. So we with the kids spent 30 seconds just breathing and just thinking to be still and know that God is God. And our kids did a pretty awesome job. That is meditation. Centered prayer is meditation. We say that prayers, like when we're telling God what's wrong with our lives, that's talking to God. Meditation is listening for God. And according to many studies, if you Google meditation is good for your health, a whole bunch of things are going to come up. One of the first things that came up when I Googled that was the Mayo Clinic. And on the Mayo Clinic's website, they say that meditation can help you to gain a new perspective on stressful situations. It can help you to build skills to manage your stress. It can help to increase self-awareness, to focus on the present, and to reduce negative emotions. That's what the Mayo Clinic says that many studies have shown that meditation, and I'm taking this right from their website, meditation may also help people with anxiety disorders, asthma, cancer. Not sure how that's possible, but somehow it can help with cancer. Depression, heart disease, high blood pressure, pain, and sleep problems. Now, if I was to ask you guys, which I'm not going to do, to raise your hand if you have one of those physical problems, I guarantee you at least 75% of you would put your hand in the air. Meditation is not only important spiritually, it's important physically and psychologically. It's important for our health. Prayer and meditation. So let's get back to those priority lists. All right, so let's think about our priority list. You've already admitted that many of you also, like me, write your priority list. So if you're like me, you're going to write your priority list on a piece of paper. Sometimes I put it on my phone, but still, I like writing my list down. Even though I'm very technological, I still write my list down. So let's say that we're going to write our priority list. There's pieces of paper in the center of the pews. Feel free to grab one, to take it with you. I wonder if we can all write our priority list for the week on a piece of paper. But here's the problem with our priority list. If you think about it, when we write our priority list, we put God on the list. Now, the problem with putting God on our priority list is that God's just an item that we can cross off. We can check God off. Oh, yep, I prayed, I went to church this week. Okay, check. Don't have to think about that again until I write my list again next week. And that's a problem. Now I'm going to tell you, I learned this from Felix, who was over at Nativity. He told me this when we were doing a youth thing once, and he said, God should not be an item on our priority list. God needs to be the paper on which we write our list. Everything that we do should be able to somehow go back to God, or everything that we do should have God as a part of it. And so now you're sitting there thinking, well, how am I supposed to do that? How am I supposed to make God the paper on which I write my priority list? Well, first think about the fact that God needs to be the structure on which we base our lives. God also needs to be the constant on which we can trust. We need to be able to always turn to God, even when our priority lists are so crazy and we are so busy. We need to be able to see that there's the white paper behind our list, and to hear God calling out to us saying, be still, and know that I am God. So let me ask, how do you make God the paper on which you write your priority list? Let's say that you really want to learn how to, meals are going to be on our priority list, whether we write them or we just know that they're there because we're human and we require food to sustain us. So let's say that you really want to learn how to include God in your meals. You want to make sure that you're praying, you're saying grace before every single meal. But it can be a really hard ritual to learn. Maybe you're always on the run. Maybe you're always on the fly and you're doing things so quickly and you never think to thank God for your food until it's all done and your plate is completely empty. So how is it that we can figure out how to add God to our ritual of eating food? What you do before eating a meal. Even if you're not going to do a big, grace, say a big grace, take a big deep breath. Let's do it together. And just breathe thankfulness. Be thankful that God has given you food to eat. It's not something everybody has. Just breathe a sigh of thankfulness. Or what about when you're driving from place to place? Now, I've said that I've become a lot busier now that I have 2 young kids, but my kids are 1 and 3. I know that we have many people in this church who have kids who are off at soccer games and hockey games and doing everything, and so they're being pulled in every single direction, driving from one place to the next. So how do parents like that, or people who are just as busy for whatever reason, how do all of you find a way to include God in your priority list? Those times that you're driving from one spot to another, turn off the radio. Meditate. Breathe. Practice your breathing. You don't breathe your priority list this week? How can God be a part of each item on your priority list? And then think about, where's worship on that list? Because if God's the paper on which we write our list, if God is the structure in our lives, then worshiping God should be number one. Now let's join in a moment of prayer. Gracious God, we come to you this week as we are learning to serve you with our time.